The remaining years of my life, not life, maybe life, my years, kung aabot ako sa finish line, ang trabaho ko, habulin kayo at palisin ko sa trabaho. Sigurado yan. Pagka dumating sa akin at totoo, magdasal ka na, prepare, magbalot ka na, kasi papatanggal talaga kita. Pero yung pulis naman na matino, alam ko, dinoble ko yung sweldo ninyo, maligaya ako, pati yung sundalo, maligaya rin ako.
It's day 2 of the NCR Plus bubble, as some businesses are hit hard by the new protocol. President Duterte appeals for understanding.
So kung sirahan mo naman yan lahat, medyo tagilid na ang ekonomiya. And that's a problem. It will be disaster for our country. Kung sarahan mo talaga lahat, it would be disaster for the country. So balance na lang tayo.
Following the implementation of the bubble, average daily COVID-19 infections in the country are expected to drop by as much as 25%. With the elections just around the corner, Malacanang hits out at critics, who they say are using the issue on vaccines for political gain.
Tumitindi po ang politika dahil malapit ng eleksyon. So kung meron pa pong konsyensiyang natitira yung mga nais manalo, na desperadong manalo.
The government admits that there are some non-healthcare workers cutting the line to get a COVID-19 shot. And despite the alleged slow vaccine rollout, the government sticks to its target of 1 million vaccinations per week. Fast, focused, and fearless. Here's everything you need to know as you jumpstart your day. I'm Charles Lejano. President Rodrigo Duterte said it's premature to ask for an accounting of the money allotted and borrowed by the government for vaccine procurement. Some lawmakers, including Senators Ping Lacson and Risa Ontiveros, earlier questioned why the vaccination drive was going slow, despite the billions of pesos allocated for the purchase of vaccines. But the chief executive said government officials will not have any chance to pocket or misappropriate this budget. He explained that vaccine money will be paid directly from the bank and disbursed to vaccine manufacturers once the shots arrive.
Ang buong akala kasi nila, yung pera na bilyon na ibinigay nila sa Kongreso, nandiyan na sa kamay natin that it's called cash. At nasaan na yung pera. Sinasabi na natin time and again that the money is with the lending bank. Yan po ay papilang. And, if you are afraid of corruption, let your mind go easy because these things are not susceptible to anything.
Meanwhile, Palace spokesperson Harry Roque appealed to the critics of the government to stop politicking and using the pandemic for their personal gain.
Tumitindi po ang politika dahil malapit ng eleksyon at ginagamit talaga itong pandemya laban sa administrasyon. So kung meron pa pong konsyensiyang natitira yung mga nais manalo, na desperadong manalo, sana po tumulong na lang po sila magbigay ng solusyon dito sa problemang ito kaysa pinagsasamantalahan po ang pandemya para sa kanilang mga selfish political gains.
Well,
President Duterte also asked for the public's understanding regarding the stricter measures imposed during this time. Duterte said he understands that it won't be good to completely shut down the economy even if there's an ongoing surge in COVID-19 cases. However, he emphasized that the state has the power to curtail movement during a pandemic to curb the spread of cases.
So kung sirahan mo naman yan lahat, medyo tagilid na ang ekonomiya. And that's a problem. It will be disaster for our country. Kung sarahan mo talaga lahat, it would be disaster for the country. So balance na lang tayo. Total maliit pa naman ito, small, not really small, but not so many are being affected. Hindi afflicted in the sense that your movement are being curtailed.
In an interview with The Big Story, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion said that the government has no choice but to implement a bubble. This as infections have continued to soar to 8,000 cases per day.
At this point in time, that is the only way forward until the vaccines do arrive in the second quarter, and most of these vaccines will arrive in the third quarter. So we will have to hold on tight and try to manage. As I know, many micro and small entrepreneurs, especially in the tourism side, are expecting to take a bump during the Holy Week. But of course, the best time to really do this modified type of lockdown is at this point in time, because Holy Week, everybody is on break.
More businesses are temporarily closing shop as the government places the NCR and 4 other provinces in a quarantine bubble. Maricel Halili tells us more.
As stricter restrictions make a turn, this private resort in Laguna started draining its pool. The resort operator is expecting clients to cancel their bookings.
Siyempre, malaking kawalan din sa amin yan dahil dyan lang kami umaasa kung mapapatigil talaga, kung talaga yung lockdown, kung talaga ila-lockdown. Yung mga customer nga namin, natakot na, nag-cancela na.
But this shouldn't be the case. The palace said open-air tourist attractions are still allowed under the new protocols. Laguna joins Metro Manila, Cavite, Bulacan, and Rizal in the NCR Plus bubble. As part of the heightened restrictions, entry or exit beyond the boundaries of the bubble are not allowed, except for APOR or authorized person outside residence.
Tandaan po natin na within the bubble, the movement is not restricted. It is only when crossing the border na yun ang ating babantayan.
Several police checkpoints have been placed within Metro Manila. They check on compliance to health protocols and the observance of the curfew policy. Curfew is from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Violators may be penalized.
Ang arrest is nangyayari dun kung merong ibang mga kasamang ibang mga offense. Like for example, pumalag. More on caution ang binibigay natin dyan.
Mass gatherings, including religious activities, are strictly prohibited. Weddings, baptism, and funerals are allowed, but only with 10 people in attendance. Outdoor dining and takeouts in restaurants are okay, but indoor dining is barred. Minors and seniors are not allowed to go out, but there are exemptions. Senior citizens may go out for exercise and non-contact sports. The government hopes these measures will cut cases by as much as 25%.
At 7,999, 25%, malaki-laki pa rin po yan, no, kung we become successful. No? But of course, we're realistic, it will not happen overnight naman.
Bibigyan pa ng ayuda yan ng gobyerno for the mayors. And of course, the healthy population can still go to work. That is where you calibrate the health with the economy.
Malacanang calls on the public to refrain from going out, especially now that it's almost Holy Week. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
The Hong Kong variant is still the dominant COVID-19 strain in the Philippines. That's according to the results of the latest biosurveillance survey conducted by the Philippine Genome Center. Health Secretary Francisco Duque announced that out of the 4,310 samples collected on March 19, 23.5 of these tested positive for the Hong Kong variant. 5% of the samples tested positive for the UK variant, while another 4% had the South African strain. And only one sample was found to have the Brazilian P1 variant.
Pareho po ito ay nakitaan sa NCR at saka din po sa CAR at pati ang returning overseas Filipinos ay nakitaan din pong malaking bilang. Ang mga mutations po na ito ay mas madalas na maganap kapag ka po patuloy ang pagkalat ng COVID-19. Kanya kinakailangan po talaga ay ang mapaigting ang lahat po ng ating preventive, early detection, isolation, aggressive contact tracing, treatment protocols.
Some private hospitals are decrying the government's order to open up more COVID-19 wards. They say they barely have enough nurses to cover their current capacity. Jen Calimon with the details.
Despite religiously following health protocols, Nurse Denny contracted COVID-19 in August last year when cases were at their peak. He is among 15,000 medical frontliners who tested positive for the virus.
Ang iniisip ko na lang noon, ma'am, kailangan kong gumaling eh. Hindi talaga ako umuwi, sabi ko na lang muna talaga ako sa hospital for 25 days.
Upon recovery, he had to tend to more cases. In a COVID ward, a nurse typically attends to 3 patients, but the recent spike has bumped that up to 12 patients.
Nakakapagod siya mentally, pinakauna kasi dami mong iniisip, daming pangangailangan ng pasyente.
The Filipino Nurses United is seeking a spike in resignations due to exhaustion.
That's extremely alarming, Jen, no? Kasi it manifests yung extent of or gravity of the health crisis. Talagang pag narinig mo sila, overwhelmed rin sila with.
The looming shortage in nurses is hampering efforts to increase COVID wards among private hospitals. The health department urged private hospitals to increase COVID bed allocation by 30%.
Ang mga private hospitals, we try as much as possible to extend yung percentage na yun. However, because of the lack of nurses, medyo limited ang aming resources.
The Private Hospitals Association of the Philippines said about 500 member hospitals are nearing 85% occupancy rate. 30 are already under critical level, including St. Luke's in Taguig and Quezon City and Asian Hospital, all of which have reached full capacity. But with severe cases only accounting for 2% of admissions, FAPI said the situation is still manageable. For the Alliance of Health Workers, a break might be the offing.
Pahalagahan naman sila kasi 1 year na tayo, and then yung mga benefits ay hindi pa rin nabibigay, mababa pa rin ang sahod, understaffed pa rin, tapos mababa ang budget pangkalusugan, at dapat ituloy-tuloy.
But the Philippine Medical Association begs to differ.
The doctors should never go on a timeout. We should be more adept and we should be more competent in handling these cases now.
The DOH said it's doing what it can do to address the lack of manpower across hospitals. Reporting for News 5, Jen Calimon, we are One News.
Here are the biggest stories from the dailies. Malacanang believes that the newly imposed quarantine restrictions in the NCR Plus bubble will result in a 25% drop in COVID-19 cases in the country. This despite the Octa research team saying that the uptrend in cases will persist for another 2 weeks. The palace appeals to the public to strictly stay home during Holy Week to help pull transmission numbers down. The Philippine Star reports that the government does not need to provide additional cash aid during the 2-week bubble. Malacanang says that's because people can still go to work despite the stricter measures currently in place to address the surge in cases. Although in an interview with Radyo 5 earlier today, Labor Secretary Bebot Bello clarified that they still have funding from the 2021 budget to provide cash assistance to qualified workers. And this from Filipino Star ngayon, treatment czar Leopoldo Vega admits that they have observed several non-frontliners jumping the queue to receive COVID-19 vaccines. However, Vega dismissed the issue, saying that the numbers are very insignificant. And he's leaving it up to the officials of the National Task Force Against COVID-19 to penalize these violators. Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez reports that almost 370,000 healthcare workers have received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccines. That's about 21% of the country's 1.7 million health workers in the government's priority list. Galvez says the government has been negotiating non-stop with vaccine makers to ramp up the country's vaccination drive.
Ang strategy po natin is magkaroon po tayo ng steady supply. Kaya po kami ni Yusek Mark Hoven ng Department of Finance at saka yung battery of lawyers niya, wala po tigil po kami talaga mag-negotiate para mapaaga po ang mga supply po natin. So ang targeted vaccination po natin by April and May, hinahabol po namin na magkaroon po tayo ng 500,000 to 1 million per week.
Here are the stories to watch out for later today. The provincial government of Pampanga has imposed a so-called household lockdown until April 5. Under this new protocol, only 2 members of each household will be allowed to go out to buy essential goods. The Judicial and Bar Council has submitted to President Duterte its shortlist for the possible successor of Chief Justice Diosdado Peralta. The President is set to choose between Associate Justices Estela Perlas Bernabe, Alexander Gesmundo, and Ramon Paul Hernando. And former U.S. President Donald Trump is planning to make a social media comeback using his own new platform. And that's how the day is shaping up to be. Join us later at 10 a.m. as we monitor the day's biggest stories from sunrise to sundown. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Just register for a free account at www.signalplay.com so you can stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.